Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov visits Armenia amid ongoing tensions with Yerevan. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says preventing a new Armenia-Azerbaijan war a Trump administration priority. And Ankara hosts controversial conference on so-called return to Western Azerbaijan. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in Armenia this week for the first time since June of 2022. This was just 3 months before Azerbaijan's large-scale attack on Armenia's sovereign territory and the subsequent deterioration in Armenia-Russia relations. While official statements emphasized strong economic and cultural ties, and Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan insisted that Armenia does not intend to reformat its relationship with Russia, the underlying tensions between the two countries were once again on display. At their joint press conference, the two foreign ministers said they discussed a broad range of bilateral issues. On the economic front, both sides highlighted the strength of the trade relationship. Lavrov noted that Russia remains Armenia's top trading partner, accounting for more than a third of its foreign trade. Security was also a key issue, and Lavrov reiterated Moscow's interest in Armenia maintaining its engagement with the CSTO. The Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process was also on the agenda. Mirzoyan reaffirmed Armenia's commitment to a lasting peace agreement, while Lavrov said Russia remains ready to mediate between Yerevan and Baku. Both sides emphasized the importance of unblocking regional transport links and continuing negotiations based on the trilateral statement signed between 2020 and 2022. Mirzoyan also brought up concerns about the media environment. He stressed the need to avoid one-sided narratives, referencing Russian media coverage that often undermines Armenia's sovereignty.
During the Q&A with reporters, the Armenian and Russian foreign ministers spoke more candidly about the strains in their relationship, especially in light of the Azerbaijani attacks back in September of 2022 and Moscow's response or perceived lack of one. Mirzoyan described the September 13-14 offensive and the inaction of Russia and the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the CSTO, as a turning point in Armenia-Russia relations, particularly regarding Armenia's decision to freeze its participation in the Russian-led military alliance. He said Armenia had immediately informed its allies of the Azerbaijani attack, specifically Russia and other CSTO members. But the response was disappointing. That lack of support, he added, led Armenia to join a quadrilateral meeting in Prague in October 2022, where the parties reaffirmed each other's territorial integrity based on the 1991 Alma-Ata Declaration, or the Almaty Declaration. Lavrov, in turn, maintained that the CSTO did react after the September attacks. He said an advance mission was quickly deployed to assess the situation and return with detailed proposals, including a plan to send observers with specific equipment to stabilize the situation. That proposal, according to Lavrov, was finalized during ministerial meetings in Yerevan and ready for approval by heads of state. But at the last moment, the Armenian side requested a delay, citing a lack of consensus. Soon after, in November 2022, Armenia accepted an EU civilian monitoring mission. Lavrov again noted that by reaffirming the 1991 Almaty Declaration, both Armenia and Azerbaijan effectively acknowledged that Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. This line of argument has become a recurring one for Lavrov. He often invokes Armenia's recognition of Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan during the Prague meeting as a way to deflect criticism over Russia's and the CSTO's inaction during and after the September 2022 attacks, even though the two issues are not directly related. Armenian authorities have repeatedly stated that they rejected the CSTO's proposals because the organization failed to politically assess the Azerbaijani attack. The CSTO didn't clearly define its zone of responsibility, didn't acknowledge Armenia's borders had been violated, and stopped short of condemning Baku's actions. In fact, Anatoly Sidorov, head of the CSTO Joint Staff who led the mission to Armenia, had made it clear that there were no plans to use military force or send a peacekeeping force in support of Armenia.
And I can remind a little bit more because what he's calling, Lavrov is currently calling special mission, it was a fact-finding mission.
Right.
And then it was also Russia's response. Well, Armenia's borders are not clearly defined, so
Right.
we cannot even say if this is an attack against Armenian sovereign territory.
Well,
Well,
he conveniently chose to ignore those things.
Well, despite the bilateral nature of the visit, Lavrov didn't hold back in his broader geopolitical commentary. He accused the West and Ukraine of stirring tensions and criticized Armenia for purchasing weapons from France, which he described as an enemy of Russia. While Mirzoyan argued that Armenia's pursuit of security diversification and pivot towards the EU was driven by the failure of the security system it had relied on previously, Lavrov countered that it was actually the European security architecture that has long proven ineffective. Instead, he advocated for a new, more organic model, which he called a Greater Eurasian Partnership. This would be based on existing regional organizations like the EAEU, CSTO, CIS, and the Association of Southern Asian Nations. I'm saying this in full because it's not an organization that we hear of. Yes, well, and others that are interconnected through economic and security cooperation. Lavrov said these ground-up alliances, including China's Belt and Road Initiative, form the foundation for a more just and functional security system, one not imposed from above but built through shared interests. According to him, the door remains open for countries to take part in shaping this Eurasian security framework. And when confronted with the fact that Russia sold weapons to Azerbaijan despite being Armenia's ally, Lavrov responded by saying that Armenia has also benefited from Russian arms, even managing to reclaim the 7 regions around Nagorno-Karabakh thanks to those weapons. He added that Russian weapons are used all over the world, including in Africa, but stressed that this doesn't mean they're always employed in ways that meet principles satisfactory to everyone. In Armenia, Lavrov also met with Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Vahagan Khachaturyan. Pro-European forces staged a protest in front of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during Lavrov's visit to Armenia, and they had several banners out, quite large banners out before.
Few people, large banners.
Few people, large banners out before his visit.
Well, just before Lavrov's visit, Yerevan hosted the regional gathering of EU ambassadors to the countries of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. In his keynote address, Foreign Minister Mirzoyan emphasized that holding this gathering in Armenia reflects the deepening partnership between Armenia and the EU. He also highlighted that given the changing security landscape and the failure of the old security architecture, Yerevan is closely monitoring the EU security discussions and the difficult choices it faces. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan also met with the ambassadors. According to his press office, their talks centered on Armenia-EU relations, ongoing cooperation, and future development. They also discussed the agenda for democratic reforms and regional developments, and especially the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The ambassadors praised the Armenian government's efforts to promote regional stability and peace, as well as its steady progress on democratic reforms.
And more in diplomacy news, during a recent U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, State Secretary Marco Rubio said that preventing a new war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, particularly an Azerbaijani invasion of Armenia, is a top foreign policy priority for the Trump administration. He also emphasized that human rights remain central to the U.S. efforts, noting that the release of Armenian prisoners is a key focus of Washington's diplomacy.
Well, in other regional developments, Ankara hosted a conference this week focused on the so-called return of Western Azerbaijanis to Armenia. Well, Baku refers to Armenia as Western Azerbaijan. In a message to participants, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev framed the event as a step toward peace, justice, and human rights in the region. According to Aliyev, due to what he described as systemic and total ethnic cleansing throughout the 20th century, all Azerbaijanis were expelled from Armenia. He also claimed that this process severed the overland connection between mainland Azerbaijan and its exclave Nakhichevan through the transfer of Western Zangezur, which is Syunik, to Armenia in 1920. He further accused Armenia of destroying Azerbaijani cultural heritage, ancient settlements, mosques, shrines, cemeteries, in an effort, he said, to erase the presence of Azerbaijanis from the region and rewrite its history. He linked the issue of return to the momentum generated by Azerbaijan's military victories in 2020 and 2023, framing it as a matter of human rights and reconciliation. Yes, the ethnically cleansed 150,000 people from Artsakh. Anyway, Aliyev called on Armenia to engage in dialogue with the Azerbaijani community, provide security guarantees, and take steps to restore cultural sites. He also demanded clarity on the conditions under which such a return could take place. While insisting this does not amount to a territorial claim, he noted that the issue will remain on Azerbaijan's agenda until it's resolved. In response to Aliyev's remarks, Armenia's foreign ministry said there is no such place as Western Azerbaijan within the territory of Armenia, clarifying that that term refers to the western regions of Azerbaijan itself. The Armenian side has repeatedly rejected this rhetoric from Baku, stressing that such statements are seen as territorial claims against the Republic of Armenia.
Well, Iran's defense minister Aziz Nasirsadeh was in Armenia this week, where he met with his Armenian counterpart Surem Papikian to discuss ongoing defense cooperation. Both ministers praised the current level of collaboration between their countries and exchanged views on regional and international security issues. The Iranian minister highlighted the strategic importance of Armenia-Iran relations, stating that Armenia holds a special place in Iran's neighborhood policy. He reaffirmed Iran's commitment to the territorial integrity and stability of regional borders, calling these principles fundamental to Tehran's foreign policy. He also stressed the significance of the Armenia-Iran border, describing it as a historic lifeline between the two nations, one that Iran will not allow to be altered or encroached upon. And these are things that Iran has been saying since for years. Yes. Well, at the end of his visit to Yerevan, Iran's defense minister told Iranian media that he had also discussed defense cooperation with Papikian. He noted that conditions are now in place to deepen military ties between the two countries. As part of this effort, Papikian has been invited to visit Iran and explore the country's defense capabilities. The Iranian official also emphasized the strategic importance of the South Caucasus, not just for Iran, but for Armenia as well. He pointed out that the region could serve as a vital link in the Persian Gulf Black Sea corridor. For that reason, he said, Iran's policies in the region remain consistent and unchanged.
And while Iran's defense minister was visiting Armenia, joint military drills between the Azerbaijani and Iranian armed forces kicked off this week in the territory of Karabakh. Ahead of the exercises, senior military officials from both countries met in Baku, describing the drills as an important step towards strengthening the security of their shared borders and addressing potential threats.
And speaking of borders, the European Union monitoring mission in Armenia announced the signing of an administrative agreement with the EU monitoring mission in Georgia. According to the mission, the agreement aims to strengthen operational cooperation, enable joint activities, and provide mutual support in urgent situations. So the message from them was description was very short. We don't know, we don't have additional information of what this entails, but there it is.
We'll be keeping our eye on that. And during this week's cabinet meeting, the Armenian government adopted a package of amendments introducing new regulations for mandatory military service. The bill, proposed by Civil Contract MP Haik Sarkisyan, creates an option for shorter-term mandatory military service. Under the new rules, individuals can serve for less than the traditional 24 months or 2 years. Specifically, they can serve for 1 month or 6 months in exchange for a payment to the state budget. So if you want to serve for only 1 month, you have to pay 20 million Armenian dirhams. This is the equivalent of 52,000 US dollars. And if you want to serve for only 6 months, you have to pay 15 million dirhams, which is about 39,000 US dollars. The proposal also raises the maximum conscription age from 27 to 37 years. Additionally, the bill imposes a significant state fee, again about $39,000, for males who apply to renounce Armenian citizenship before reaching the age of conscription, which is 18. So the government stresses that the bill aims to strike a balance, increasing the number of conscripts while limiting opportunities to avoid service and ensuring that funds currently diverted unofficially are directed into the state treasury. At the same time, it seeks to strengthen the professional army by financially supporting contract servicemen, including bonuses for those who sign multi-year contracts. Now, this has raised a lot of discussion in the country about the inequality, right? If a family has the means to pay all of this money. The counter argument to this, Rubina, from
that's already the situation. Whoever has the money finds a way to avoid.
Why is that already the situation? So there's two core issues, right? So reforms in the army are not picking up fast enough for people.
Fight against corruption is not picking up
obviously.
fast enough.
So the government is saying, well, look, it's happening anyway, so we may as well take the money into the state budget and then redirect it toward to build up a professional army. But look, this is a very sensitive topic, as we know, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more discussion about this. And
It is because, this is just the government that adopted this decision. It's still going to go to parliament. There's going to be further discussion on this. And as we know in Armenia, a lot of the bills, they're usually, and it as should be the case, never written into law with their initial text. So this might change a lot.
Or it might not, because if this is the ruling party's position, they have the majority in parliament, right? So
we've seen that their bills usually pass, but they're usually passed with a lot of amendments at the end.
Yeah, because they always backtrack because they see the pushback from society. Let's see how this is going to be.
Yeah, it's definitely something we'll be speaking a lot about.
Yeah.
Well, in more local news, the Armenian parliament and extra-parliamentary opposition continues to discuss the possibility of impeaching Prime Minister Pashinyan. However, they have yet to reach a consensus on a unified candidate to succeed him. For the impeachment process to proceed, the opposition must first agree on a candidate, and that's already been a large hiccup. Last week, former civil contract parliamentarians Hovik Aghazarian and Hakop Arslanyan proposed Edmond Marukyan as a potential candidate. Marukyan is the leader of the Bright Armenia party, had previously formed an alliance with Pashinyan Civil Contract Party. This was back in 2017 under the YALK alliance, which dissolved following the 2018 snap parliamentary elections. Bright Armenia did not pass the electoral threshold in 2021 elections. In March of 2022, Marukyan, however, was appointed as Armenia's ambassador at large by Prime Minister Pashinyan. In February of 24, he submitted his resignation, citing fundamental differences in foreign policy perspectives with the government. Meanwhile, Armenia's second president, Robert Kocharyan, stated this week that, before we go into Kocharyan's, Marukyan accepted that he would become the candidate, but he was not endorsed by the other forces in the opposition. Well, so meanwhile, Armenia's second president, Robert Kocharyan, stated this week that Pashinyan's impeachment is currently unrealistic and he does not wish to engage in a process with minimal chances of success. However, third president Serge Sargsyan maintained that the impeachment is feasible. Speaking to reporters after a court hearing, Sargsyan emphasized that the opposition must take action and initiate the process in expressing no confidence in the prime minister before the next elections. He warned that during this period, the government might implement measures and make concessions that could become irreversible. Sargsyan mentioned that the I Have Honor faction is prepared to provide the signatures of its 8 deputies and is willing to support the candidacy of Robert Kocharyan or any other candidate from his team.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of interesting things developing ahead of the elections next year. Well, the head of the Nornork district, this is a suburb of Yerevan, Dikran Dermarkaryan, resigned this week. Last month, Dermarkaryan assaulted civic activist Daron Chahoyan. Both men now face criminal charges over a brawl that broke out in the Nornork district office after Chahoyan criticized the construction of a kindergarten, which led to Dermarkaryan insulting the activist. And as always, we talk about the articles we publish, and this week it was all about salt. Yes, our lifestyle magazine that we are lobbying. And so we have a couple of photo stories that we published this week, Rube.
Yes.
The first
we have
one.
2 this week, this month.
Called The Sweet Quagmire of the National Gallery by Arek Balayan. And I'm really pleased that Arek Balayan, who's a very gifted photographer and a friend of ours, is collaborating with EVN Report, and he takes a journey into the soul of the National Gallery of Armenia. And he took some really interesting pictures and spoke to some of the people who work there, and it was kind of a cool take on it.
A very interesting perspective where you realize that people have spent a lifetime working for the National Gallery in the archives, on the paintings, cleaning and restoring the paintings, and who these people are, and what they think and how devoted they are. And the title was weird, The Sweet Quagmire, but that's something that everyone says.
Yeah. Of course. And the second photo story is by Ani Gevorkian, a photojournalist. It's about senior citizens volunteering and trying to, get a second lease on life, if you will, which is something that here oftentimes seniors are sort of relegated to, to stay at home, take care of the grandchildren or great-grandchildren.
Or stay alone.
Yeah, or be lonely. So this is called Seniors Reclaiming Joy and Meaning, and it's the story of two senior citizens who were volunteering, one at the Yerevan run and the other one at the concert hall. So great read, great pictures. You should definitely check that out.
And we do have some articles about alcohol. That's the lifestyle section. One is called 1320, the Room Bar, a sanctuary of spirits, distilled and human.
Loved this one.
It is a small mini neighborhood. Just people pass by it probably every day, never even think of entering through that small dalan that basically so low that I can pass under it, but anyone higher, taller than me, and that doesn't
duck.
Yeah, they have to duck.
Well, actually, we visited this bar yesterday. So it's called 1320 Ruin Bar, and it's basically a transient, very temporary place that people have taken over and turned into this very weirdly cool DIY kind of a place, and it will disappear one day. But it was a really good read by Maria Gunko.
And we do have a cocktail review coming up tomorrow.
Yes, look for that, about old fashions.
It's going to be about the old fashions.
Yes. And then another piece about coffee raves, which I find so ridiculous, I'm sorry, I have to say.
Judging from the response on social media, a lot of people agree.
Yeah, it's called Filtered Coffee and Filtered Fun. It's by Hena Abushian, and it looks at sort of Yerevan's adoption of this global trend called coffee rave, and she kind of says, do we have to follow every trend, and can't we just figure out our own thing?
Sometimes you can say, what's the harm?
Yeah.
Just don't go if you don't like it. But still, it's something that's happening across Yerevan, and a lot of people are sometimes surprised. It's like, what is this?
What is this early in the morning? Yeah.
Early in the morning. And the last piece that we're going to talk about, it's called the Gems of the Khosrov Reserve, and it's about these two waterfalls in the Khosrov Reserve, National Reserve in Armenia, that not a lot of people know exist, not a lot of people can access unless you go on a special tour. And these are little sites that you don't think are very Armenia-esque in a way, because they're just little waterfalls, and they have this, the myths behind
the mythology
them.
behind it. Yeah, Vahagin and Astri. Well, that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we will be back again next week.